Sorry, I forgot to hit record again. So we're supported both from the operating budget, which is funded by tax dollars, as well as the capital budget. And the capital budget is typically the city borrows. I believe we're borrowing on average about $3.5 million each year for the capital projects. So the next kind of focus here is on our operating budget. And so we've kind of taken a look at some numbers here and kind of looked at, I know there's different home values and all that, but a $400,000 home in Middleton pays about $2,500 in taxes that comes to the city. I know if you own a $400,000 home in Middleton, your tax bill is a lot more than that. But there's a portion that goes to the school district. There's a portion that goes to the technical college, and I'm not sure if there's a portion that goes elsewhere or not, but I believe that's the divide on the property tax. And so what Parks and Recreation receives from taxes in terms of a $400,000 home is $185.55 to support everything that we do. That's parks, conservancy, forestry, recreation, the pool. We're working on the breakdown of what that is for parks, what that is for forestry, what that is for conservancy lands. And I can tell you about half of that 185 goes for maintaining our parks, and then much smaller, like in the $30 range for forestry and roughly in the $30 range for conservancy. And when you get all the way down to the pool, it's like less than $7. And so we may be off $1 or so here, but we get a lot of comments about, I pay taxes, I pay a lot of taxes, and I should get this what I want, my 1 lane for swimming laps at the outdoor pool. And people don't realize that the revenue we make from swim lessons and the revenue that we generate from the swim team's use of the pool exceeds any tax dollar support we get or anything we would generate from actually having expanded lap swim times. And I know those that have been on the commission for a long time have heard this before, but that's just one of the recent next door complaints that's been generated. And I know a lot of people kind of jumped in and chimed in on that subject matter, and I don't want to give next door any more credit than it needs for being the greatest place to find a lost cat. But that's ultimately what I see a lot of on that site. So I guess what I'm trying to paint here is, if you think about anything you've done in the last 3 years, or if you want to boil that down even further, last 6 months, that hasn't increased in cost, everything has, and our costs have increased. But the problem is, based on the state legislature, that $185.55 isn't going to change anytime soon. The ability for the city to increase that, even if it wanted to, they're very limited. They can raise the mill rate based on the net growth of the community, which has averaged in the last couple of years from like 2 to 3%. And so when you put that increase on the tax levy, you can barely cover annual increases in wages, and fuel cost is going to be a big one as we look at, along with health insurance costs and those kind of things. It doesn't leave a lot of room for buying more cleaning supplies, for janitorial services, or finding ways to support additional park services. So I'm just trying to put this in perspective, and I'm not trying to complain or anything like that. I'm just trying to educate. And I think that if our Parks and Recreation Forestry Commission doesn't know this and isn't able to communicate it, then I'm not doing what I need to be doing. So knowing some of that, I tried to look at some budget priorities, goals, whatever you want to call these, and I'm open to ideas, suggestions, but Some of these have kind of been consistent over the last 5-6 years, and some of them before that. But obviously, we want to adequately maintain facilities, provide quality recreational opportunities for the community. From a staff standpoint, we've really tried to dive into NRPA, which is the National Recreation Parks Association, has 3 pillars, and they align, I think, very closely with our department in terms of conservation, health and wellness, and social equity. And we try and maybe not to the full extent we want, but we try and look at those 3 topics in everything that we do. We need to explore opportunities to add requested services where staffing, financial, and space needs are available, or the space needed is available. We frequently hear that people want more recreation programs, and the challenge with adding recreation programs is everyone understands that the challenge in finding staff right now, and I'm talking frontline staff to deliver the programs, but we also have to have staff that can supervise those, manage those, budget for them, get the supplies. And we kind of feel like we're at a critical point in our current management staffing and what we can oversee additionally in terms of recreation programming. So any talk of adding programs, we really have to look at workload, and is that reasonable to be able to add programming. We've added an immense amount of recreation programming over the last 5 years and have built that up, but to add more is going to require additional staffing and resources, and then in a lot of cases just the space to be able to offer those programs. You've heard me bemoan before the fact that we don't have a community center that a lot of communities our size has. I feel like we've done a lot of partnering with the school district to identify space that's available, but some of the district space that's available doesn't fit when our users want space. An example that I've used a lot is adult volleyball leagues. We're not able to start until much later in the night, and we have a lot of requests to start in that 5:30, 6 o'clock time frame, and the district, I think the earliest we're able to get space is 7. So that limits how many teams we can take. Nobody wants to play the late game, so there's challenges with even our current programming in that regard. Want to make sure that we're investing in infrastructure to ensure that previously constructed amenities are maintained, updated, safe, and vibrant. And right now, I think we've fallen behind. Our tennis courts are in rough shape. We've made good progress on playground equipment. We're working towards the basketball courts being upgraded, but we know that there's infrastructure, trails, which we've had a lot of discussion of whether trails fit under Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. Do they belong under Conservancy lands? Do they belong under bike, ped, and transit? And we haven't come up with a good answer to that issue, but we do have a lot of trails within our parks that in the next few years that we're going to have to take a serious look at how we improve and preserve those for future. We've had some very preliminary discussions, but I think this is a critical piece, is in developing a friends group to establish alternative funding methods for park improvements. A lot of communities have these 501c3 Friends of the Parks or similar groups that are able to not only champion projects, but are able to fundraise and help support the city, where examples of these are youth sport complexes, all abilities playgrounds, where the city's funding a portion of the project, and the community and business community are helping to support through donations. The challenge with donations is that most people don't want to write a check to the city of Middleton, but to write a check to the Middleton Friends of the Parks, where that's tax deductible, and you feel like your dollars are going directly to the project. So a lot of communities have done that. That is one of our goals. We know there's some people in the community that are interested in pursuing that. We've got, as a commission and myself as a staff, we've got to develop a vehicle to take that not only through our commission, but to finance to get that approved and viable. We want to continue efforts to ensure compliance with ADA Title II. We've made good progress. We need to keep moving in that direction. And then we want to sustainably develop new park amenities and manage new park development to meet community needs through proper use of park development funds. And then the last thing that I did is kind of put together a very brief, for those that are new to the commission, tomorrow night is the kickoff to the budget process with the finance committee. What each department head will meet with city administrator, finance director, and the mayor and talk about the upcoming budget and some of the things we want to accomplish. And then from there, we get workbooks, and capital budget's a big one where we put together not only the capital program for 2023, but a 5-year capital program. I've tried to focus here on 2023. We're not going to be able to do all of this in 2023, and that's where kind of prioritization of these projects, you'll see that some have numbers. None of these numbers are, I shouldn't say none. Some are pretty close to what we're looking at. Some of the larger projects are going to need just a deeper dive and more direction to get to a number that I want to make sure we're comfortable with if we are going to move forward on that project. You'll note there's some different colors here. The black projects would have to be funded from the capital budget. The green projects would, from my perspective, definitely meet the definition of park development fund projects. And the orange ones in the middle are kind of ones that we have to make a case and explain rationale for why park development funds could be used. In a lot of those cases, probably only a portion of the project could be funded from park development, and the other portion would have to be funded from operating dollars. But you will remember that I think most of you are aware that we are currently, Baker Tilly is doing a study of our park development fees, a needs assessment, and that we'll get more clarification on that issue and that topic as we head into budget season. They are likely to wrap that up in September, is the hope that there'd be a presentation back to the city at some point in September about the work that they're doing. And then I also kind of put, we're doing both the Parisi and Woodside Heights basketball courts this year. I did put a line here to replace all of the existing basketball hoops that we haven't done yet, and think that we should be able to do that for about $20,000. And that would be replacing the current backboards and rims with the new glass backboards and adjustable height hoops that have been very popular in the handful of parks that we've done to this point. And then kind of put together a future schedule for asphalt. And in some of these cases, that could include just crack filling and redoing the color coat and new lines, or it could be repaving. And again, those will be evaluated closer to the year that they come up to determine what needs to be done in those situations. So what I'm looking for is a couple of things. Did we miss any project? Did I miss any projects that are on the radar or that we've talked about? And then, you know, from a goal standpoint, did I miss anything? Are there any questions, or is there any feedback from the committee? And then the last would be prioritization of these projects. We've averaged anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 in capital allocation in the capital budget. It's our intention as a department to, instead of try and fit into that allocation that we get from finance, is to try and better state our needs and list the projects that we feel need to be completed, so that we're kind of trying to present a more accurate picture of where our needs are in terms of infrastructure replacement. I want to go through some of these projects. The spongy moth suppression, PRFC has been not engaged in that discussion, but we've got the spongy moth is was formerly known as the gypsy moth, and we've got infestation levels in the Saxwood, Park Street neighborhood, and are in significant need of completing some type of aerial spray program in 2023 to it attacks oak trees and defoliates oak trees, and prolonged stress on the oak trees over multiple years can significantly injure or kill those trees. The spray program the state had went through, I think, around 2011, and then was discontinued, and now we're starting to see significant populations again to address. So the playground replacement program, that's an annual effort. The playground on the schedule next year is Stonefield, and that would be the playground that's within the park. That's typically been a 2 to 5 year old age structure, as the elementary school adjacent has the 5 to 12 structure. Also, the wall at the practice wall at the Stonefield tennis court is in need of repair replacement. The Taylor Park parking lot is an interesting one. That parking lot was put in as porous, and porous asphalt is not a good fit on parking lots. I'm not saying it has to be done in 2023, but this is something that we've got to have on our radar, is that parking lot is going to need to be repaved at some point in the future. It's starting to show it's not holding up well. We've had requests for some type of shade structure over the skate park and over the Lakeview Park playground. I have relayed that although I can see the value of both of those, I'm not sure that they raise to the top of the priority, but I've also told people that I will put them in for discussion purposes. I mentioned the basketball hoops earlier. A couple of meetings ago, we approved a contract with Parkitecture to do a master plan for both the Lake Street Boat Launch and Lakeview East Park, and that plan effort should coincide with the budget process and have obviously financial needs to implement those plans. We previously discussed the Lakeview Park tennis courts. My current thought, based on discussion, is to redo 4 courts and add up to 6 pickleball courts in the area that we initially talked about expanding from 4 tennis to 6. And I think a more appropriate plan would be to look at 4 tennis courts and potentially up to as many as 6 pickleball courts in the space that we could have added 2 tennis courts. I think it'll be a better mix and better serve that neighborhood as well as the community. We've previously discussed the Parisi Park shelter in terms of making that a more viable shelter location, as well as adding year-round restrooms that not only would serve the park, but serve the Creek Corridor Trail that runs below Parisi Park. We've had discussions about an all abilities playground that would serve children and adults with disabilities, as well as able-bodied children as well. They've become very popular in a number of communities, and it's something that does not currently exist in our system. There's been ongoing discussions. MRD is the site on Highway Q where Rush Soccer has soccer fields, and there's been interest in Rush in potentially looking at co-funding or some type of improvement plan there. There obviously have to be a lot more discussions, but I've kind of left this on the list as a potential opportunity. And then we've also had a couple of years ago a request from the Hidden Oaks neighborhood to add a basketball court in their neighborhood park. It was something that at one point the homeowners association had discussed potentially funding, and they've requested that PRFC consider whether that is a viable improvement for their park to be funded in some way, shape, or form from the city. Happy to answer any questions or elaborate on anything more, or turn it over to you guys at this point.
All right. Do we have any questions or comments? I know one question, Matt, I had, and this seems to have completely dropped off the radar, but a few years ago, there was discussion about what to do with the aquatic center. And I feel like I said, that's kind of dropped off the radar now, and just trying to kind of gauge what is, if that's something that would still be something that would be like down the road as a possibility of, you know, replacing or redoing, or if that one, we've done enough repairs to it now where it can live a little bit longer.
I think it's an ongoing concern, Nick. As I looked at 2023, we received ARPA funding in the recovery program for the aquatic center in the tune of $300,000 over 2 years. So there's 150 this year, and there's 150 potentially for 2023. I've asked multiple times that the future of the aquatic outdoor pool get discussed as part of the strategic planning process that the city is currently undergoing, and wanting some further direction from finance and council in terms of, we know there's a cost, you know, that ongoing maintenance cost on an aging facility, and is the intent of the city to continue to invest in the current facility, or at some point explore a renovation expansion. For those that are new to the commission, the original pool was built in 1976, and the current pool was constructed in 1997 and opened in 1998, and therefore is now older than the pool that it replaced. And the scary thing is, last year's projected cost on a new facility was somewhere between $7.5 and $10 million. De Pere, who we look at as a peer community, opened a new outdoor aquatic center last year that roughly about the square footage that our current site would support, and I believe their cost was somewhere between $7.5 and $8 million. So that is a big concern moving forward, and I can't tell you what the right answer is. We've had some studies done. We had one study that said you probably are best to invest in a new facility. We had another study that was done that said you can invest in the current pool and expand its life cycle. So I think it's really a discussion that we've got to have input from finance and council on how to proceed.
Okay. Any other comments?
Matt, I guess my comment is about the Taylor parking lot. How old is that parking lot?
It was put in 2014, I believe.
Okay.
And
why was it put in as a porous, I think you said, and not?
So porous asphalt was extremely popular in Middleton at that time for a variety of reasons in being implemented. In a parking lot where you have turning movements from cars, what we've seen is that the porous ravels, so that the granular form of the asphalt, the tire turning movements kind of pulls that, and you end up with a parking lot that essentially is basically ball bearings on top of the remaining asphalt, and it's slowly crumbling away, and at some point in time is going to have to be addressed. Public Works at the time was adamant that porous asphalt shouldn't be used in parking lots. They've been proven right. And it's not something that we would ever do in the future unless there were significant improvements to porous asphalt. But
I guess
There were-
for me,
there were-
that's a lot of money for something that's not that old. But
So what's the
which could be used other places, I guess, is what I'm saying.
what's the proposed solution for the parking lot? What's the 300 what 100,000? What's that go to?
Milling and relaying, repaving the asphalt with traditional asphalt.
Oh,
I mean, we talk about using it. I mean, the pool, I guess I'd rather put it towards the pool or, I don't know. That's a lot of money for a parking lot.
spongy marsh suppression, that's the entire budget for this project is coming from us?
Well, it's a forestry effort. So it would come from, the request would come from the Parks, Recreation and Forestry Department, and it would, it's a request that we would have to make. How the Finance Committee and Council choose to fund it, I don't see how it's not a general fund obligation.
Oh, I think it's a general fund, but I don't think it's necessarily all forestry. I think that, homeowners and others are benefiting from this as well. What do we do on tennis courts and basketball courts in terms of maintenance of asphalt on a regular basis?
There's never been a program, and most of the courts now are in the point where crack filling may be an option, but some of them are beyond that, and that we need to identify the correct program in terms of the annual maintenance and look. And it's a really good point, and I will put that on my list to develop what we should be looking at in terms of annual maintenance on tennis courts and basketball courts. But my concern is we also need to develop that for our trail system.
Yeah, but my point is that crack filling is something that's very beneficial early on, not after we have a problem. It's hard to get people to spend money on new pavement, but that's when it's needed, I think. I guess those are I agree with you on the pickleball courts that there's a big demand for those, and I think that's a good idea. And basketball court for the Hidden Oaks. Do we have much activity on existing basketball courts around in neighborhoods?
I see, but I'm also highly tuned on that's one of the first things I look at when I go into one of our parks that has a basketball court is our kids playing basketball.
Yeah.
And that's a personal thing with me, but what I've seen is Taylor is very regular because it's a really nice court. When we put the new hoops on Orchid Heights, we saw a lot of use. I'm hearing reports from Parkside that since we put the new hoops in, Parkside's got a lot of use. So I think it's a situation where if it's a viable amenity, they're getting used. And what the Hidden Oaks Neighborhood Association has pointed out to me is that a lot of the families that first moved in now have kids that are approaching the teenage years, and there's a lot of interest in basketball.
Yeah, I understand that. I also understand a lot of people have basketball hoops in their driveway, and I've seen an awful lot of use of basketball courts that had nothing to do with basketball, some of which was malicious. So I would not be in favor of that myself, Mr. Cat. So yeah, Thousand Oaks is out there by its lonesome, more or less. They're not close enough to use the town of Middleton stuff, but I don't know what's the number of homes there. 100 some?
Likely. I think the other challenge is, as you've identified, they're kind of isolated from our community parks.
Yeah.
And our community parks in their area don't have basketball courts either.
Well, I think one advantage to the basketball courts that are in the parks as opposed to people's driveway is that, you know, a group of kids can get together and go to the park.
Groups of kids don't get together anymore, Joan. I understand that that's the way it used to work, but I just haven't seen that unless you have organized activities going on. Things don't happen too much these days. You don't see pickup games of almost anything. Unfortunately, I mean, I wish that were true. There are basketball courts that they could get to that aren't too far away, but it's not walking distance.
All right, any other comments?
Matt,
Erica
Go ahead.
has
go ahead.
a few comments.
Okay.
So Stonefield, I think those tennis courts are in horrible shape. I would prioritize the tennis courts over the play park, which I think still looks like great. A lot of people use it and love it. And also for the shade and community structures, personally, I would prefer natural shade versus the man-made structures that become eyesores and detract from the natural beauty of the park. So that's I would propose planting some like fast-growing trees for people that need shade. And I guess that's all I had. Thanks.
I agree with that too, Erica. I think Lakeview has plenty of shade. And I guess I'm not real high on the Quarry State Skate Park either as far as shade, but I think Lakeview has plenty of shade.
And, you know, and I could make an argument, I could say almost every one of our playgrounds, you could make an argument that, you know, a lot of them are out and open in the sun, right? I mean, so if you put one at Lakeview, all of a sudden now you're adding one at Orchid Heights, the next thing you know, you're adding them at every little, you know, people are requesting at every neighborhood park. That's where I would be a little concerned about, okay, we're going to focus on Lakeview, but, you know, but none of the other full sun playgrounds are going to get shade. So
Yeah, and planting trees is a lot cheaper too, I would think. And it's good for the environment.
right, any other comments?
I wanted to ask, Matt, when you talked about the maintenance of trails and you said there are quite a few in Middleton, did you say they haven't decided if parks or conservancy, I don't remember, or forestry
So
maintains those?
it's not an issue of who maintains them, it's who's requesting funding for them. Because when the challenge has been that when PRFC ranks projects or prioritizes capital projects, we have all of these park needs, tennis courts, park shelters, and trails tend to get pushed down the list. And Conservancy Lands has all of that acreage that they'd love to do, you know, restoration with. So the trails get kind of pushed down the list, and we've tried to find the right place to advocate for trails. I will also share that previously PRFC leadership and loud voices didn't want parks money being spent, like park development money being spent on trail development. So the concept of linear parks has become very popular. And as I talk to colleagues, this issue with infill development and what to do with park development funds and how to support some of the apartment, you know, the multifamily development, that's a lot of communities have used those development dollars to connect those new housing units to the trail system and have used the dollars to do innovative things with what they call linear parks. And a linear park may include playground equipment along a trail. It may include fitness equipment along a trail. But the concept of a linear park, I don't think is a new concept. And in some of these cases where you're not gaining acreage, it's also maybe a solution to how those residents are able to recreate in some ways.
Okay.
I think you also kind of mentioned the fact that, is bike ped and transport, are they the ones requesting funds? Because I was on the creek corridor today, and for the first thing I noticed was, while the bridges are nice, there's a lot of that asphalt that's still, I'm assuming, got washed out during the flood.
Well, and just so that everyone's aware, we just opened bids last week on the reconstruction of the creek corridor, new bridge abutments. So all of that work is, fingers crossed, that the environmental assessment that FEMA has just completed, that we get our FONSI, which FONSI stands for Finding of No Significant Impact. Once we get that, then we are able to award both the bid for the creek restoration, so the restabilization of the creek banks that were damaged and eroded from the flooding. Once that work is completed, then we can sequence the bridge abutment repair work, any bridge improvements, and then the last thing that will get done is the creek corridor trail will be repaved in its entirety from, I believe it's from Parmenter to Century Avenue, as all part of that FEMA project. But there are still some steps before the hope is that work would start this fall, and that the trail paving would likely be next spring into early summer.
Okay, that's good information though. But as I was biking on it, I'm like, this could actually, part of, because they're making the bike path a commuter path along the northeast or northwest or northeast corridor of the city, and like there's a lot of people who I could see using that as a commuter path too.
There's a lot.
It's not just for recreation, but that, going out to Deming Way and going out towards the Costco area. So it's like I understand where you're coming from. Like, who asks for that funding to maintain that? Because if you're going to use it as a viable transportation option, is that something that we should have to pay for, or I should say request money for? Question about Precy Park. I see that's I know that's been an ongoing item in our wish list, and I know a couple of years ago we thought we had it and we lost, the funding fell through, or so I forget exactly what happened.
Well,
or we didn't get bids for the project, or
no, that we done an RFP for design services, and we're set to award it. And the state law change with the development funds, we wanted to get further clarification that development funds could be used for that project, and probably more so, it's likely not to be 100% funded from park development, and would require some support from the capital budget.
Okay.
So that's all tied in with the Baker Tilly study.
Okay.
Yeah, Matt, there was a proposal some time ago from City Council to ask for an increase to the levy on a permanent basis. What happened to that?
I believe it's being discussed again tomorrow night as part of the finance and council meetings.
So it's still live. Okay. I doubt very much that any of that would flow down to, parks, but thought I'd ask.
Well, in the initial discussions, the focus was staffing, and there was talk of one additional park maintenance staff person.
Ooh, all right.
All right, Matt, do you need us to work on the talk about the priorities of these now, or is that going to be in the future?
I
meeting?
actually feel like I've gotten some good feedback
Okay.
and kind of know, at least I think I've got an idea of trying to define some of this further. Erica's comment about the Stonefield tennis courts. I want to talk, Erica, I'm going to talk further with you about that. First off, the first challenge is that adding that to this list is going to blow up the budget for 2023. And I want to, those courts were done, the installer of those courts say they're in good shape. And we had them out last summer and they did some repair work and he felt it was holding up extremely well. But Eric, I want to meet, I'll set up a time to meet with you and take a look and dive into that a little bit further. And if it can't be 23, we can maybe definitely look at something there in the future.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Any other comments?
I guess I'm also wondering about like the year-round bathrooms at Parisi Park. Why there and not the Orchid Heights Park where the like Pheasant Branch is? Seems like that one's pretty popular.
The
Like in
only
the
thing that
winter.
the only thing I would say there is that the Orchid Heights shelter is newer and is relatively, although undersized, it's functional, whereas Parisi has zero function to the current shelter. There's room for 3 picnic tables on each side of it. And I'm not arguing that Orchid Heights wouldn't benefit from having a really nice shelter as well, but if I gave my staff a wish of what facility burnt down in the system, it would be unanimous for that Parisi Park shelter because it's a challenge to maintain. It's aged. There is some ADA limitations and concerns with it. So that's the number one on the list of the park staff, whether that is the end all be all of justification. I can't say, but some of the reasoning why Parisi's ranked ahead of Orchid Heights at this point.
Okay, I just know everyone uses Pheasant Branch like a lot. But I also don't know if we need year-round bathrooms either. I'm not sure.
Number one complaint I get
Okay.
is our park systems used year round and our bathrooms are open from May 15th to October 15th. It is the single largest complaint I get on December 1st when it's 75 degrees out and the playgrounds are full of kids of why the restrooms aren't open. And the problem is 2 days later, it'll be 15 degrees out and we'd be bursting pipes. So.
See, my experience was on the spring side of it with, the 75-degree days in April, and going to Lakeview, but I think that's taken care of now. But all right. Anybody else have any other comments? And Matt, you don't need any action on this, is that correct?
No, this is just informational, kind of the kickoff. There'll be a lot more discussions similar to this as we move forward.
Okay. All right. If no one else has any comments, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Second.
I can second it.
Okay. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. And nobody opposes? All right. We are adjourned.
Thank
Good
you.
evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay, thanks.